Now, it's a different country, so, you know, maybe it's country differences. JISC does a really good job of marketing. Whereas I'm not sure the libraries in Finland have been so involved in marketing. So part of it is marketing. People in the universities know about the library and JISC. But this biggest part, the library is still the biggest part. So that's of readings. So some of the readings of an individual come from the library, some don't. But that's 27% of the readings now come from the library. This other part, this green part, is from their departmental, school or departmental collections. And the library tells me they pay for those. So when we are analyzing, we're saying the library is here, is these two together. Okay. So it's about half of reading. Still the biggest, by far the biggest contribution. What is really interesting about this is this purple part. These are readings that come from repositories. We have never seen that before. That's always just been an other, a small little piece. Finland, like a lot of countries, has made a big investment in encouraging universities to build, libraries to build institutional repositories. I've never seen that before. Now that doesn't mean it comes from necessarily from their own institutional repository. A lot of it has to do when you search. In Google Scholar, for example, it will show you, sometimes the first one, a copy that's held in an institutional repository, rather than something that's behind a paywall. So, but this is getting that from a repository, that's huge. So some of this is the library, and certainly the library spent money on it. So some of that is, but I can't tell exactly. So there, I could spend about an hour on this one chart, because if you think about it, the other thing is this. Websites. How much of that really came from the library? They got link resolvers. They got authentication programs. I'm a faculty member, and I'm sitting at my office, and I search Google Scholar, and I get an article. I don't need the library. I get it from the web. Okay, so the transparent library systems, probably a fair amount of this. Not all of it, but I would say some of it has to do with the library. Again, marketing. They don't realize it. We need to, flash, brought to you by your library. I don't know, will irritate people, but it's that kind of thing. Okay. The other part of this story is all this other stuff. You could call it competition, you could call it easy access, you could call it, great, we have lots of ways, redundancy, whatever. But this is research social networks. That also hasn't shown up before. And 6%, from 0 to 6% in 10 years is pretty significant. Okay, so people are sharing. This is a copy from a colleague. A lot of that is email. A lot of it is also colleagues that are connected with research social network, but they didn't necessarily call it that way. Some of that is I'm a doctoral student, and my professor told me to read this. Okay, that fits there, or gave it to me. And then other, which they couldn't quite fit in a place, and we couldn't tell what they meant. So I would call all of this competition to the library collection, but maybe that's not so bad, right? Aren't libraries like the main place to advocate open access? Okay, so we asked for that. We've been advocating for that. So we shouldn't be surprised. It's actually beginning to work. The other thing that's interesting here, and I really won't spend an hour on this, but this one is interesting. Personal subscriptions. Practically disappearing. In 1977, that was the biggest chunk. Readings from personal subscriptions, usually as a result of belonging to a professional society. And you got the journals and you read, and that was the big chunk. And it's professional society, print journals, those personal subscriptions are almost all print readings. But it's been getting smaller and smaller and smaller, not just in Finland, everywhere. That's practically disappearing. Huge changes represented here. And lots of things for libraries, I think. The library is still the biggest, but it is decreasing in people's minds as well as reality. So it's probably not decreasing as much as they realize, because they don't know, because our systems are better, but it's also decreasing. However, if I look at that chunk, the green and pink together, to look at what are the characteristics of library-provided articles as compared to the others. The library-provided articles are most often for research or writing. They are ranked as more important to principal purpose than the others. They are E, and not surprising, because libraries often don't give people a choice, and we've made that commitment. But there are also, people say they're more likely to have already cited them or to cite them in the future. So there are some characteristics, which tells me about a value proposition for library collections. The value proposition is supporting research. It doesn't mean you don't support teaching and other things, but the real importance of the readings that come from the library are supporting research. Now, just because they read from the library does not mean they read in the library. And I'm not talking about undergraduates. We did not look at undergraduates at all here. So these are researchers. We asked, where were you when you read the last article? Okay, this is probably not going to surprise you. But the in the library is under 1% now. Okay, so it's very, very small percent of the reading. Again, it differs somewhat for undergraduates, I would assume. Some commuting from home. One difference is this is a geographic difference. The Finns read a lot more from the office or lab than we've seen in other countries. And this was true 10 years ago and it's true now. They read less from home. It has increased a little in 10 years, but they're reading more in the office or lab for whatever reason. Other places we see a lot more commuting, and in the U.S. in the UK there was a lot more reading on the train or whatever. But here, reading in the. I asked Finns about this, and they said that's because they have a life. Yeah. Right? You go home and you're not working all the time, so you actually like this. Okay. We asked about how you became aware of the last article, and here I grabbed one after hearing the talk this morning. I thought it would be important to look at the 10-year difference in Finland, because something is really important going on here. This big red piece, I think this is when my colors are a little messed up, but the important thing is the red piece. 10 years ago, this is searching. Now, this is searching. Still the biggest, but searching to find articles has gone way down. We solved searching, people got searching, and now they're getting too much. You know, they're searching, and we have an abundance issue. We used to be trying to solve access. We solved access, and Google solved access. Now we got to find the good things. We've got too many. How do I get it down? The library used to be the primary. We can trust the library for providing me good things, but I'm getting too much now there. So how do I get the good things? I've got cited in another publication is the green. Okay, that one got the, and another person is the purple. So look at the purple. Another person. This is those research social networks. This is the trusted colleague. This is trust. I've got too much to read. The library's given me too much. Google's given me too much. I'll go to my group in Mendeley or academia.edu, and they'll put the articles up there I want to read. Sometimes they're from your subscriptions, which licenses don't allow. Did anybody see the letter from STM, the International STM Publishing Association, to telling academia.edu, I think it was, to cease and desist? That they had illegal articles that people were posting there. Okay. They own Mendeley, by the way. Elsevier owns Mendeley. I'm not sure that the letter went to Mendeley too. But why do researchers do it? Because it's easy, and because they're getting too much. So it's a kind of a try. How do I pick the best among all of these things? I can't read more and more and more. I don't have more time. So this is kind of interesting here in terms of what's happened. The implications of libraries I'm not sure, but I think some kind of trustworthy, some sort of methods. You guys know about impact factors and about quality, and some researchers know about it. Some are not so sure, but something that helps people identify the things that are quite not only relevant but trustworthy is is somewhat implied in that. And another indication that finding has changed, this is from the solicited testimonials, if it were, and a lot of people made comments like, I'm getting things because of Twitter, so I'm following this Twitter feed that is somebody I trust, and they recommend an article, therefore I go and read it. So I find out about it here, again, from a trusted source. I find more working papers and early versions. I search on Google Scholar, they show me, or I go to archive.org or something else that helps me find earlier. By the way, when people read working papers, preprints, early versions, if they write, they usually cite the full citation of the published version. They don't necessarily have read, they won't necessarily have read that final version, but they will cite it, because journals recommend it, so. Okay, and I'm sure, put that there just to irritate all of us. The last one. Search services on the web are completely sufficient for finding material, so there is no need for special search services provided by the library. If I were ProQuest or Scopus or any of those services, I would worry a bit about this. Okay, let me switch to use, value, and outcomes. The part of use value is what do people use? Again, I'm giving you examples of reading. It could be the service. So you could use the same method to talk about any of your services. But for readings, for the last reading, what was the purpose? 2/3 of the readings are for research or writing, and writing. Teaching is the magenta, and then the next is current awareness and continuing education. So people read, researchers read for lots, or scholars read for lots of purposes, checking facts, presentations, etc. But research and writing is the main purpose of the readings of scholarly articles. Okay, this is not true for other types of materials. People really make a difference on containers. Articles good for research. We ask them about news and blogs and all different things. They're using blogs for current awareness, news for current awareness. They're making a distinction based on containers. 10 years ago, I said in front of a group publicly, containers don't matter anymore. I'm not going to do this kind of study anymore, because what's an article, what's a book, those are containers. It's all can be on the web. It doesn't matter what the container is. I was wrong. That people use the container, article, research, peer review, as a way to understand how they're going to use it and its value to them still. Maybe 10 years from now, that will be true. But they go to a blog for current awareness, but they're not using it so much for research. So people are making those kind of container distinctions. And so if you're looking at value or purpose of different kinds of materials, you do need to make this distinction. Still, it's still in people's mind. It's not just information. All information is not equal. Whether it comes from a book, different purpose. And then if we look at those readings for research, they spend more time reading. They rank those readings for research as more highly valuable to purpose. And as I mentioned, this is the flip side of it, they most often come from the library. So reading, again, research is kind of the main purpose. There's lots of other purposes. So another kind of the next downstream part of outcomes is to ask people, what did they do with the last thing they read? What did they do with this reading of article? You could say, what did you do with the knowledge you gained in a class that we gave you? What did you do with the last book? And again, you can do this ever to get these kind of testimonials, but focused. Not just, what does the library mean to you? Too broad. It's for this last thing. So we have a whole long list of possible outcomes, and these are in rank order. these again are from the Finnish study. The order isn't too different, slightly different in different countries and different years. But number one, inspiring new thinking or ideas. Half of the readings did that. About half of the readings also helped justify the work. And then we've got, smaller numbers for improve the reading, improve the results, narrow or change my focus, save time or other resources, and then there's a whole bunch of them that have a small. The first negative, wasted my time, was 1% of the readings. Now, again, here's a disclaimer. I did have somebody say to me once, the reading wasted my time, why should I waste any more of my time answering your survey? So, okay, thank you, when they got to that point, yeah, you gotta be really brave to put open-ended comment boxes on your survey. But, so it probably is an overestimate. People remember the good things probably more than the bad. But the idea is the outcomes, the act of interacting with these containers of information, and a lot of which are from the library, actually change what somebody does. This is a downstream value. It made me think of new things. I mean, that's what a university is for, or a research lab. I mean, trying to make new research and new ideas, and that's the number one. I mean, that really has having a profound impact. If you think about it, it's not just justifying my work, which is also important, not just give me something to cite, but actually change the way I think. And that is, you can't put a dollar sign on that, or a euro or a kroner sign or whatever, but you can put a value on that, an outcome. Okay, let me talk about now putting monetary signs and look at return on investment. Okay, so here we get into a little bit more controversial and value. So return on investment in the strict sense, that is the absolute sense, is quantitative, and it's looking at the ratio of money returned, value in here is money, to the institution for each monetary unit invested in the library. The library's budget is $1 million, we're 10 million whatevers, and the library helped contribute 20 million, 30 million, 5 million, whatever. It's actually looking at money. It makes academic librarians very nervous. And it's a different way of thinking of the library. So it is controversial. But the idea is, can we demonstrate that library collections, in our case, contribute to income generating activities? We spend a lot. What? Your cereals budget just went up again? We spend a lot on these, and so what are we getting in return from the institutional perspective? So that was what we were asked to look at, and have tried to look at. Again, rightly or wrongly, I think it kind of depends on who your rector is, who your funders are. At University of Tennessee for a long time, our chief academic officer was a classicist. She didn't care about this. That's not the way she thought. She cared about more non-monetary. But at one of these other institutions where we were, the chief academic officer was an engineer. And that person actually cared. They wanted to see the numbers. So it kind of depends on what their worldview is. So this started with these two Library Connect reports, and some of you may have seen it. So these are Elsevier's Library Connect. So Elsevier was interested in looking at that too, not the unit that deals with the libraries. Okay, and so they funded these two reports that started about the time that we were doing LibValue. The first was 2008, the other is 2010, and I think these are still available. The first one I was just read it and was consultant, and then the second one they asked us, our research team, to do it. So, again, you can find both of these. The first one was really a proof of concept. It was done at just University of Illinois. It was done with a consultant, but with people I was working with at University of Illinois. Just so one university trying to figure out what makes sense. And then they said, okay, it's true at we could do this at Illinois, can it be done internationally? So this next one is we went to 8 different countries. So I'll tell you about these. And again, we can talk about the good and the bad. So phase 1, which was the proof of concept at University of Illinois, first thing that had to be decided is what part of the library contributes income. So much of what the library does has nothing to do with contributing immediate income. It's preserving things for the future. It's helping students succeed in their classes. It isn't that you can't, it's really hard for most of the things the library does to draw, an academic library in particular, to draw an income generating. And as I say, it makes a lot of people kind of nervous to even think of it that way. So we said, okay, there's one area where there is money definitely coming in, and that is grant funding, externally funded grants. So let's look and see if we can find a way to look at how the library collection contributes in the belief of the grant writers, people writing the grants, how it contributed to the income. So it looked at citations in the proposal that came from the library collection, so the percent of citations in proposals. It also did solicited information from the faculty, the creators of those proposals, which ones of them felt, so we got feelings in here, but which ones of them felt that the citations were important to, their literature review was important to getting the success of their grant. And then it looked at successful grant proposals, and then divided that by the library budget to see what percent of that came. The conclusion of that was, for every dollar invested in the library collections, $4.38 came in grant income. So it was, people felt that the library was important, we reduced it by that, and the library collection money went into that. Okay. The whole methodology and the calculation and everything is in that white paper, so you can see. So phase 2 was to take it to 8 countries, 9 institutions in 8 countries. So besides the US, we had Canada and Spain and Australia and South Africa and Hong Kong and Japan and Korea. Yeah, so that year we were all over the place. And what we did there is we interviewed all of the heads, the presidents, rectors, whatever, vice chancellors, whatever they were called in that country, about the role of the library and to get the budget information. And we had to get all, it was very labor intensive if you decide to do this. We had to get all of the grants information, we had to get all the library budget information, then we had to interview the faculty who did the proposals. So it's pretty labor intensive. Don't ask me about the return on investment of this methodology. Okay, all right, but it was interesting. And those findings we found vary widely. So here's a cautionary note. Okay, so for some, there's a huge return on investment with this kind of calculation. So 13 to 15.5 per 1 for research intensive institutions that have a high percent of science, technology, and medicine. The M here is medicine, not mathematics. Okay, so medicine. So those that have medical schools and a high research, the library collections are very much involved in the grant proposals. And the faculty feel that the library collections hugely contribute to the success of their grants, so very high. For those that are research and teaching balanced, they do research and teaching at their universities, and they are full subjects. So they do science, technology, medicine, humanities, and social science. You know, the full service university that does everything. There was still positive. It's 1.3 to 3.4. And University of Illinois, fits right there. Okay. But the others, so they're still positive. For those that are really focused, they're focused on research and teaching, but they're smaller. Teaching is more important, they don't do as many grants. They do as many proposals, or those countries where funding comes from the central government non-competitively. Hong Kong, for example, where it's a totally, it's a different, it's not this trying to get external funds, the money kind of comes this way, then it came out very low. So, I show you this because we were asked to talk about it a lot. It got a lot of press. It's one of the methods we checked. Some people have used it successfully. It has worked really well, again, in public libraries where your value is to the community. But be very, very cautious, and don't try to do it for the whole institution unless you're looking at value to the public. You need to pick something where there's obviously value in, value out. And the other cautionary note is it's very difficult to compare institutions. I wouldn't say that these guys have a lower ROI on grants than these guys, but they have other kinds of value probably. So be a little cautious. It can work. As I mentioned, that it really depends on the mission of the institution. So pick something that is your main mission. Research institutes are going to have very low trust. So if you're in a research institute with big grants, this can work really, really well. At 15 to 1 in a major research institute in Spain that was not doing much teaching, they love it. Okay, so I'm not supposed to say which institute, excuse me. So anyway, one of them anyway. Again, teaching has smaller, and it really varies. So, return on investment in the strict sense can work, be cautiously. Yeah.
Can I make a small comment?
Yeah, yes.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Because I prepared for doing this grant study here before I decided on the other one, but found a place was really in the blue box.
Yeah.
Because the grant's income were far too small to do anything.
Okay. Trying to go back here. Yeah. So you're here. Yeah.
So the grant's income wasn't big enough to make a study of it.
Yeah. So the idea was multiple methods of value. It isn't cheating to pick the method that gives you it's not giving you the answer you want, but the answer that makes sense in your context. If it doesn't make sense, if your main mission isn't going to out and get big grants, then you're kind of hitting yourself in the head to make that your value proposition. Because that isn't the value of the institution. You need to really think of what's most important to the institution and what role does the library play in the institutional mission. And if that's not the mission, then this isn't the method. But in this case, it was. Now, you also have to be prepared for results that you're not going to get here, So you have to be prepared. It isn't always positive. Okay. So because of that message, I think that for return on investment, I think that rather than the strict dollars in, dollars out, euros in, euros out, let's see what else we get, yen, I can't remember all the different currencies, but instead of that, I'd like to think of return on investment in a softer sense. This idea that it's values of all types and outcomes to stakeholders. So and the institution. So individual, private, social, institution. Those kinds of things, you have to look at both of those. But from use of either collection services or contribution to the communities. And again, you need to kind of separate them to really look at it. So that leads me to the last one I'm going to talk about, which is supporting success, which is a kind of return on investment, but in a very soft sense. So we found that it was really useful to put a human face on this supporting success, and so this is when the ISO standard looks at soliciting value, is to ask people. We heard some of that about what happens within, in this case, collections, and so you get testimonials in a sense. So here's a testimonial from somebody in Finland. The e-access is essential for scientific writing. I could not do the kind of research or teaching I do without these resources, and scholarly articles are the lifeblood of all we do. And this person actually went on and on and on about how that scholarship and research and teaching and everything could not succeed without access to high quality scholarship. So those kinds of testimonials are very important, I think, to look at value, that human face. Now, to my classics head of university, this spoke a lot more to her, because it's the how people feel, and that kind of softer side rather than the money. She said, I'm not so concerned about the dollars in, dollars out. What I'm concerned about is what are we doing in our institution. And we decided to also build personas. You can get individual testimonials. You'll also get individuals who say nasty things too, remember. I mean, so, you know, you've got bad and good. But with personas, you can begin to look at who does the service that you're looking at, you're examining, who does it really help, and what kinds of things. And these heads of schools told us in the ROI study that they thought that was most important role of the library, and the reason they continue to fund libraries, is to help success. That success, helping successful academics is crucial. And helping students be successful is part of it, but also really serving success. So we thought we would do this. British Library about 10 years ago did a, gosh, it's been more than that, 2004, 2003, 2004, British Library was very good about, they did some wonderful personas as well, and testimonials. But we built these personas from the data up. We didn't start with a persona of somebody who we think is a typical user. We looked at our data, our quantitative data. And we built a persona, we decided we'd build a persona of success. We could build a persona of a young science person. We could build a persona of a middle-aged classicist or whatever. You know, you could take the data and then look at how that person, that character differs from others. We took the success, because we thought, again, that's one of the main values of the library. And we defined success from our demographic questions as someone who had won an award in the last 2 years. So we did ask that about your award, if you've been awarded things. And then we also asked people about their publishing characteristics. And we took the top quartile of publishers, of people who publish. Again, in the academic world, that's success. They publish a lot, they won awards. Okay, here's the successful academics. In Finland, the top quartile was about 9 works. They publish a lot. most of our universities, it was less than that, but we stuck with the top quartile. Okay, so what are the characteristics of that person? They read a greater variety of materials than other people. They say they read lots of articles, but they also read books and book chapters. They read blogs, they read news, they read lots of different things. So more so than the less successful. They are readers. They are consumers of information. They spend more time per reading. So they make that exchange value. Successful people are making exchange value. They use the library to get articles, but not for much for other types. They say that a wide variety of types of social media are important to their work. And they listed as important listservs, cloud services, research social networks, collaborative and authoring platforms. They listed them all, or checked them all, as we gave them a ranking scale of importance. And these people. So the successful academic is an information-intensive person. They really use a lot of information. Now, this isn't cause and effect. You read more, I'd love to be able to say, read more and you will be successful. I mean, we all think that, right? But this is starting with success and seeing what their characteristics are. So you're supporting success by providing access to a wide variety of high quality information. Now, I'm not sure what the library role is here with the variety of social media that they use. Maybe there isn't a role. You know, they can get that on their own, but we might want to think about that. Okay, so let me wrap up here. So value, again, I think it's demonstrated by time invested. That's a kind of exchange value. Value to purpose and outcomes, and use and outcomes. And I think that you've got to use multiple methods. I don't think one method solves everything, and the method that works for you doesn't necessarily work for you. Okay? Value is a conglomerate thing. And you need to separate it out. It can be an economic thing or personal. It can be a public or social or external. And you remember I mentioned environmental value, the fact that small percent of people read in the library and they're reading mostly from e-sources. That's not a negative that they aren't reading in the library. That's a positive. That's an environmental value. They don't have to come. They can read from wherever they are. So that's an environmental value. It's not that they say, I never come in the library anymore. Yes, they do. They come in all the time to the e-library, whether they know it or not. And so we have to kind of send that message. I do want to mention, I mentioned these before, in closing, is these paradoxes that you need to be aware of. One is the exchange value paradox. I've been talking about time equals value. What's the fourth law of library science? Save the time of the reader. So it's all time is not equal. Time, you save them time in finding to give them time in reading, using, consuming. So you need to be aware of time of reading and consuming, not time to find, not time to walk to the building. So make sure that. The other paradox that I mentioned is that the better the system, the less people realize they're using it. We've spent a lot of time and energy of making ourselves invisible, and we are succeeding. So there's got to be a way. Marketing is part of it, branding, education, all of these things. We can't go back. We don't want to go back, but we have to let people know. And then the final paradox is libraries do not have, nor do they want, a monopoly on content. So I've been giving you all these examples of content and value of collections, so I'm really bad at making 10-year predictions, but I would say 10 years from now, you really don't want to base most of your value on collections that are available open access or from other sources. Don't build your whole value proposition on published collections. Unique collections, services, other things, but we have to be really careful. And after lunch, I'm talking about research data, so that's one of those kinds of things. And then last thing is, again, just in conclusion, tie what you measure. Not everybody's going to measure the same thing. Tie what you measure to the mission of your institution. If grants are important, for heaven's sakes, don't measure your value in grant income. Be sure to, you need to think about measuring outcomes, not inputs or outputs. What transformation has happened to an individual, how it's helped. I really think that the mixed methods that ISO and talks about as well are really important. Quantitative data is important to show trends, to show return on investment, to show averages, but qualitative data to tell a story, and you want them both. Stories without the data, I'm not real, I'm a little concerned about that. I think you really need them both. And again, no one method stands alone. That it really requires a mixture of methods, and it requires a plan. Assessment, measuring value really requires a long-term plan. You cannot send a survey, every year to people. It will drive them nuts. So you need to have a plan to say, okay, this year we're doing this, next year we're looking at this. So you kind of this long-term plan on assessment. Okay, thank you very much. Oh man, I got 1 minute. I'm sorry, I get carried away here, but and everybody's hungry. I know, but is there questions? And I'll be here at lunch. I can answer questions individually, but questions in the group?
I was thinking about this search, how to discover articles, and the search that is the lessening. I wonder how that is connected to the search portals. Because when I did my study, we just had started using Primo, the search portal.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't know how this is affecting.
Yeah, but that's still search.
Yeah.
it was surprising to me. I mean, we looked at that over and over. I said, whoa, this is really different. I think that it doesn't mean that people aren't using it. Okay, clearly they're using it and they're still reading a lot, but the percent of articles found by search seems to have declined. And I think that whether it's Primo or Google Scholar or whatever, people do still search, but I think they're just finding too much. But it also corresponds directly to the rise of social media sharing platforms. So that's the thing that went way up. So if I can search and I can find stuff and I say, oh God, I got 100. How do I decide what to read? Or I can go to my research team and I can say, hey, tell me what to read. Read these 10 things. So that's convenience. That's trust, that's convenience, that's saving time. That's something that existed always. It was always there, but now it's much easier because we put the articles up there, whether we should or not. And so it's really quicker. We used to share, you guys are probably all too young to remember, authors got these little cards. So you'd get a little postcard in the mail that says, please send me a copy of your article, and you would dig out a paper copy and you'd put it in an envelope and you would mail it. So there was always sharing, but that's timely, and I mean, it takes too much time and everything. Now, you can say, put a copy of your article up in academia.edu, up in Mendeley. So, I think that's probably why. So yeah, we've invested a lot in search and people still use them, but maybe people are getting too much. Anything else?
Any more questions?
Okay, well, I'm glad to answer questions over lunch, or we can come back to some of this this afternoon too. Thank you. Thank you.
Da det lunsj. Dere har fått et lite kart som viser veien til stedet hvor vi skal spise. Det går jo an å gå i gruppe eller finne en venn hvis dere ikke står i hele kartet. Kan dere gå til rommet her? Det blir det låst? Ja.